and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to another video. And today I'm going to be doing another quick quarterly goals update and talking about how my reading goals went in the last quarter of 2019. So, I'm just going to be talking today about how my reading goals went in October, November and December. There will be a video coming up where I talk about how my reading goals went over like the whole course of 2019 and what my goals are for 2020. That'll probably be up later this week / next week, but for now I thought I would just talk about my goals in the last 3 months of the year. So in the quarterly goals updates I've done so far, I've gone through all of my main goals for the year and how I did in all of them. I'm not going to do that to the same extent today because I'm about to do a how my goals went for the whole of the year video, and that would kind of be the same. So I'm just going to go over a few little points and then my little reading goals checklist that some of you may recognise from other videos, but there we go. So my Goodreads goal for the whole of 2019 was originally set at 80 and then I upped it to 100 a little way through the year. So at the end of December, at the end of the year, I have read 155 books according to Goodreads, but I've actually read 194 books because I also read a lot of unpublished stuff for work because I work at a publishing house, which I can't track on Goodreads. So 194 books over the whole course of the year, which is pretty good. So over October, November and December, I think I read 42 books, which is slightly less than I have been reading every few months for the rest of the year, but still quite a lot of books to read in 3 months. Another challenge I've been doing this year was the Reading Through the Ages challenge. So I haven't done so well on this in the last few months of the year. Over October, November and December, I only read 1 book for Reading Through the Ages, which was a bit of a coincidence. I didn't really plan it. That book was The Lost Future of Pepper Harrow by Natasha Pulley, which happens to be set in Japan before 1900, which was one of the prompts. This was a wonderful book, which I loved very, very much. I read it because I love Natasha Pulley and because the publishers very kindly sent me a review copy more than because I was trying to tick stuff off on Reading Through the Ages, but I'm glad I did a little bit towards it, a final nod towards the challenge at the end of this year, because it has been a really fun challenge to do and I feel like I was much more focused on it in the first half of the year. Another of my challenges for 2019 that I somewhat fell off the wagon for in the last 3 months of the year was my authors I want to read more by list. I only read 1 more of my authors I want to read more by in October, November and December. I read The Festive Spirits by Kate Atkinson, which was less than 100 pages. Kate Atkinson was on my list of authors I wanted to read more by. I definitely intended when I put her on that list to read more than just a very tiny collection of short stories by her. But I can tick that off. I also did read another book by Natasha Pulley, which I just mentioned, who was also on my authors I want to read more by list, but I already read another of her books earlier on in the year, so I feel like that also kind of doesn't count, so not so good on that one. However, my Trollope project, I did very well on it in the last couple of months. So for those of you who don't know, over the course of 2019, I was trying to read 12 books by the author Anthony Trollope, who's one of my favourite Victorian authors. So I began October a little bit behind. I was 1 book behind on the challenge, but I did read 4 books by Anthony Trollope over October, November and December, which is good. So back in October, for Victober, I read The American Senator, which I buddy read with Jenny from Bookish Shenanigans. I really enjoyed this. It tells a story of 2 very different women and their kind of complicated romantic relationships in a particular small town. In November, I read The Belton Estate, which I really loved as well. This tells a story of a young woman called Clara who is torn between 2 very, very different men. Clara is a wonderful character, and I feel like her characterization was really what made the book for me. It was a really, really wonderful read and quite a short one too, so maybe quite a good place to start with Trollope. Another good place to start with Trollope would be The Claverings, which I read in December, which I loved. This tells the story of a young man called Harry Clavering torn between 2 very different women, as is quite a common thing to happen in Trollope. One of whom, Julia, is very wealthy and is his old love who jilted him years before, and the other of whom, Florence, is not wealthy but is much more kind of stable and reliable in many ways. But both Florence and Julia are quite likeable characters, so as a reader you feel a little bit torn between them too. And then I also read in December Harry Heathcote of Gangoil, which is a little Christmas novella by Anthony Trollope set in Australia following a young man and his kind of relationships with his neighbours, which I quite liked, but not as much as the other 3 that I've just mentioned. It didn't feel very Trollope to me. I don't know what it was about it, possibly just that it was set in Australia, but the writing style didn't feel like the writing style I know and love from Angie Trollope. But there we go, still an enjoyable read. But now let's go on to my little reading chart, which I have been updating throughout the year. I've really enjoyed having this as a chart. I'm definitely going to have one for next year, but more on that in another video. But I will go through it for October, November and December. As you can see from the chart, October and November I didn't do so well on my like monthly reading prompts. December looks quite good, I'm very happy with December, but October and November look a bit crazy. And to be honest, I think it's mostly because in October I was focusing entirely on Victober, which is fair enough because that is a big readathon, and I knew that in October I wouldn't really tick off lots of other like things. To be honest, I'm surprised I did tick off so many things. In November I was catching up on all the work reading that I hadn't been doing in October, so I didn't read that many books that weren't for work, so again that's kind of why. And then December I feel like was a good month where I'm happy with all of my prompts, and I also read a lot in December too. But anyway, let me go through them one by one. So I've already spoken about the Trollope books. I read 4 Trollope books, 1 in October, 1 in November and 2 in December, which means I have completed my Trollope challenge, my Trollope project, which makes me really happy. In terms of the authors I want to read more by, I definitely haven't been doing so well. Like I said, I read a book by Kate Atkinson and Natasha Pulley in December, but I had already ticked off Natasha Pulley from this challenge earlier on in the year, and the Kate Atkinson book I read was very short, so I feel like I have succeeded on the technicality and didn't actually do so well in that challenge at all. But there we go, that's fine. In terms of reading books on my Victorian long-term TBR, obviously I had a very successful Victober, and I ticked off 5 things that I had said the previous Victober I wanted to read at some point. But in November and December I didn't read any Victorian literature apart from rereads and my Trollope books, but there we go. In terms of my TBR jar picks, I did read 2 things from my TBR jar. One in October I read the Diaries of Hannah Colwick Maidservant, which was absolutely fascinating. And then in December I read Exposure by Helen Dunmore, which I've been meaning to read for ages, which was really wonderful. And this is a fantastic kind of domestic spy novel with wonderful characters, and I just absolutely loved it. Did not do so well in terms of my buddy reads. My plan had been to try and do a buddy read every month this year. To be fair, November and December were the only months that I haven't managed to do a buddy read in. In October I buddy read The American Senator with Jenny from Bookish Shenanigans, as I said, and I also hosted 2 read-alongs of A Woman of No Importance by Oscar Wilde and The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde, which I also tend to count as buddy reads because a read-along is basically just a giant buddy read, right? The main reason why I didn't do any buddy reads in November and December is just because I've been really busy. And when I'm really busy with life, I take longer to reply to people, and therefore I don't end up doing buddy reads, but hopefully I'll do more in the beginning of 2020. I already have quite a few buddy reads planned for the next few months, so I'm glad about that. In terms of reading review copies, I didn't do so well in October and November. I have been trying to like catch up on all the review copies, but I think I just slightly fell behind because in October I was reading books for Victober, and obviously it's not that common to get sent a review copy of a Victorian book because obviously they were published a long time ago and there's not the same kind of marketing campaign behind a new edition of a Victorian book. And then in November, like I said, I was just reading for work really. But I did read a few review copies in December. I read The Lost Future of Pepper Harrow by Natasha Pulley, as I've already mentioned, which was wonderful. And then I also read a couple of books that I got given not from the publishers but as part of like book subscription boxes that I've been sent for review to use in my bookish gift guide video. So I read Sweet Bean Paste by Jurian Sakagawa, which the company Osame Books sent to me, which I loved. It's a fantastic, lovely Japanese novel. And then I also read these 2, The Little Prince and The Distance of the Moon, which came in the classics crate I got from Bookishly, which I also really loved a lot. They were fantastic. I've already mentioned my Reading Through the Ages challenge as well. Like I said, I read The Lost Future of Pepper Harrow in December, which I'm apparently using for all of the challenges, and I loved a lot, so that was good. But that was all on that challenge. In terms of Japanese fiction, in November I read Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and in December I read Sweet Bean Paste. I really love Japanese fiction. It's been nice to read a bit more of it this year. I don't think this is going to be a goal that I'm taking forward to 2020 just because I've read nearly all of the Japanese fiction books I've got on my shelf, and I don't want to like commit to buying or getting lots of stuff at the library. And to be honest, I don't think my library has that many translated Japanese fiction books. Very good on Angie Trollope. Lots of Angie Trollope in my local library, but I feel like Japanese translated fiction is not necessarily the easiest thing to find there. But I've enjoyed reading quite a lot this year, and definitely ended on the high with Sweet Bean Paste, which was amazing, so that was lovely. In fact, my two favourite Japanese books of the year were the first Japanese book I read this year, Miss I Sandwich, and the last one, Sweet Bean Paste, so that was good. The penultimate challenge on my little reading prompt list is a backlist Zaffa book. So I work at a publisher called Body of Books UK. Zaffa is one of the imprints, so I've been like catching up on the backlist over the course of the year. So in November I read The Beekeeper of Aleppo, which I listened to on audiobook. This tells the story of a Syrian couple who come to Britain as refugees. And then in December I listened to two backlist Zaffa books, The Wayward Girls by Amanda Mason, which is a ghost story reminiscent of the 13th Tale, with lots of like twists and turns and a kind of complicated, messy family setup. And then also House of Ghosts by W.C. Ryan, which is a historical fiction novel set on an island in the midst of the First World War, at this big grand aristocratic house party where there are ghosts and mystery and possibly attempted murder. And then finally I had my free choice, where I just, you know, tick off for all of the other books. This is the only challenge which I have achieved every month of the year, because every month of the year I read something random which doesn't fit into the other prompts. So there we go. So yeah, that is what the last 3 months of the year look like on my little reading chart. Like I said, there will be a video very soon going over my whole yearly goals and how they all went, but I didn't want to make this video too long because I feel like otherwise I'll just end up going over the same stuff in that video. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video anyway. I've enjoyed doing like checkups throughout the year on how my goals are going. I'm not sure that this one was as necessary as the previous ones, as I'm going to be doing a like yearly update anyway, but I thought I would do it anyway for consistency, and hopefully some of you have enjoyed it. And yeah, that is all for now, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.